are more objective observers, right? So they can possibly make better decisions than people in the hand. They have access to they're neutral, so they can observe how both are playing the game. But never in my life have I been in an instance where the actions, the talking of spectators influenced the decision making of the people in the hand. Um, in 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 fact, I think people in the hand they tend to like block things out. So I would say, yeah, in theory, if I'm making these predictions, then maybe the players in the game will take these predictions into account. But in my observation of people, when they do things, they don't really care what the observers think and want. They're just focused on the game itself. So, does it make sense, Kitty? Do you want to respond to that, or do you want to ask a follow-up question?
I understand your analogy. I was thinking that if the world population is more and more aware of what is happening, maybe at some point it will have an impact on the decision makers, and they might want to play their game differently. But that is something we will see going forward. I do have a follow-up question, but it is not this related to this first question. The follow-up question is more about, do you think that the transnational capital you mentioned, flowing from the old Western Europe bloc to the North American bloc, it seems these days, do you think that there's going to be contention between Europe and North America because United States is more powerful now and they're kind of working with Israel in a way, but it's probably not easy for the European bloc to be spectators. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that people prioritize the nation state. People think that the nation state is a constituent player in this world game that we have. And I don't know how true that is. I think transnational capital is beyond the nation state. It controls the nation state. It basically warps geopolitics to its advantage. And quite honestly, I think that Western Europe is a vassal state to the United States. This has been true after World War II. It's true especially now in that the United States is forcing Ukraine to fight this war in Ukraine, which does not at all benefit Europe. So I agree with you that a lot of transnational capital is flowing from Europe outwards because, quite honestly, Europe is hopeless. But this is not going to create tension between Europe and the United States because Europe is essentially a colony of the U United States. I know there's been a lot of anger over Trump's tariffs against Europe. I know there's been a lot of anger about Greenland and possibly about Canada in the future and possibly even over the Falklands as this year progresses. But you have to look at exactly what the Europeans have done in response. Okay, you have a lot of rhetoric, you have a lot of theater, but like what the Europeans done? Well, they've done exactly what the Americans asked them to do, which is basically up this war in Ukraine, increase NATO defense spending, and prepare the population for conscription. So I don't see at any point how Europe diverges from the United States. If Europe and the United States were really in conflict, you would imagine the United States were, you can imagine that Europe, their best strategy would become closer with Russia and China, right? To basically come to a rapprochement with both countries because Europe, how Germany became rich was they basically had access to cheap Russian energy and then they converted that into really expensive manufactured goods like BMWs and Mercedes and sold to China. And now what's Europe doing? Europe has a trade war with China and Europe has a real war with Russia. So I don't see how the United States and Europe are conflict with each other. Okay. Archer, did you have a question? And guys, I know there are a lot of questions, but could we just please stay on topic? I know a lot of you are interested in the Iran war, but we'll get to that in the next section, okay? Archer, could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please, or make your
Yeah,
comment?
yeah. First of all, thanks for taking my question. I remember last time you were talking about like the possibility or like the concept or theory of Argentina kind of becoming a resource colony um for I think like Israel or America. I was just curious as to how that works. Like if there's no military operation, like does a resource colony work in terms of like trade deals, or is there some sort of like IMF preferential treatment, or like how does that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question, okay? So my theory about this is you're absolutely right in that, okay, well, in order for Argentina to become a resource colony, it needs to build a manufacturing capacity to be so. Right now, you have a population that's poor, but pretty complacent. They're pretty happy with the way things are. They don't want to exploit the environment. They don't want to go build factories. They're pretty happy with the way things are. And those who are unhappy, they just move out. It's like Canada, right? So the only solution to this problem is population replacement through immigration. Okay, that's a strategy. So right now you have, I think that you have lots of, well, I do know you have lots of IDF soldiers going to Argentina every year on a tourist visa to visit. Every year, there a billionaire. I forget his name. But he has a ranch in Argentina. He brings about 10,000 IDF soldiers for a summer retreat every year in for Argentina. You have Javier Milei signing trade deals with Israel. But the only way that Argentina can reach its full potential as a resource colony is if you bring in lots of immigrants. And who are the most ideal immigrants to bring in? Indians. Okay. So imagine a situation where Israel provides the muscle, the IDF basically, and you have Indians coming in as energy, as labor. And look, right now, India and Israel are like best friends. Modi and Netanyahu have become really close. And the logic of this is really simple. If you're India and you'll become the next China, you cannot use China's playbook, right? You cannot have American companies come in and build up your manufacturing capacity like they did in China in 1980s and 1990s. Because first of all, the Americans already did this and it didn't work out well for America. But also, India is a democracy, so it does not have the state capacity of China, where China can just politically will will this into being. It can basically create these political policies that shift the people from the countryside to the factories. China also has a really good logistics network. That really is the key to China's manufacturing success. It's logistics network, right? It's able to move people from the countryside to the cities. It's able to move supplies, move raw resources from all around the world to China, and then export manufactured goods all around the world. So India cannot be next China, right? At the same time, India has a major advantage over China in that China is aging, whereas India has a pretty young, vibrant population. So what you do is you basically move your population overseas, right? And this is already happening. You got millions of Indians flowing into Australia, into Canada, and every time that India signs a trade deal, it requires that nation to open up its borders to Indians. Okay, so recently Japan has signed a trade deal with India. I think part of this trade deal is that Japan also has to welcome Indians into Japan. Okay, so this is how India plans to get rich by exporting its young labor overseas. And Argentina makes a lot of sense because Argentina is almost like virgin territory. You've got a pretty complacent population that don't really want to work, that don't want to exploit the environment. And so if you just marry Indian energy with Zionist capital, this would be an unbeatable combination. Okay, and that's the idea. That's a plan to force massive immigration to Argentina to create this resource colony. Does that make sense, Archer? Do you want to ask a follow-up question or make a comment?
No, that makes perfect sense to me. I never really thought about it that way before. I never really considered what the trade deals would look like. But that's a really interesting take, and I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Archer. That was a great question. Okay. HH, could you unmute yourself, please? HH.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Jiang. I'm from Australia and I love your videos. Thanks very much for what you do. So my question is like, when it comes to Argentina, like why Argentina of all countries? Like, what is the history of Argentina and like how did this goofy hair clown, Milei, how did he like become president? Like, he seems like as a goofy clown. Yeah, I don't really know much about Argentina. Can you please explain?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Great question. Okay. So, um, if I'm trying to venture capital, I'm basically a VC, right? I'm a venture capitalist. And I'm always looking for the best bang for my buck. I'm looking for the best investment opportunity. And there's certain criteria I need to meet to figure out if it's a good investment or not. Okay. First of all, I need to look at its potential, its growth potential. Can it scale? How wealthy can it become? So I don't invest in the United States because the United States is saturated with wealth. It's actually reached its potential a long time ago. I don't invest in China either because the population is aging, the economy is in decline, its geopolitical prospects are not that bright, right? Because China's an export economy, and if there's a war raging around the world, well, that economy collapses. Okay, so I don't look at where everyone's looking at. I look at potential growth possibilities. All right. So that's the first point, that criteria. Number one is potential growth possibility, right? So where are certain places in the world where there's tremendous growth possibility? Well, Argentina is one place, right? Because low population, lots of resources, really untapped environment. Okay. That's number one. Number two would be a place like Australia, where, Australia has a pretty advanced industrial base, but it hasn't reached its full potential yet. Okay, so Australia is another possibility. Ukraine is another possibility, but there's a war in Ukraine, right?